So what do you think to this? When it comes to sports, it is, well, it could be argued that it is the case. To be clear, I think that this is the case, that a typical man just has so much advantage, particularly because of viralization of testosterone. And that's why there is a women's league in general. It's because testosterone, which is the same as being given steroids, fucking works, man. Like it's really effective.
It's a hell of a drug. Yeah.
Exactly. So like if you've got it so that there is no conditions for being a woman. So for instance, you can, if you're a man and you transition to a woman, you can keep your testicles. You have basically steroids, and you manage to have that during the time when your plates hadn't fused. What worries me is that even if you were able to, I think that is a really big issue, and that's why gender really isn't relevant. It should be to do with more of the secondary sex characteristics, the viralization, the presence of testosterone, what it does. Each sport is going to have its own kind of agreement there.
First of all, I appreciate your use of the word viralization because I don't get to hear that word enough. That's great. And second of all, yeah, I think that's the point of just completely taking gender out of it entirely, isn't it? Is to say that like if this person has greater muscle mass and greater bone density, and therefore they're able to lift more weights, it doesn't.
You see what's going on here? Stephen is basically saying that testosterone is key. He'll go on to say testosterone lets you have higher VO2 levels, although he doesn't use that term, higher hematocrit levels, although he doesn't say that term. He uses hemoglobin. And what he fails to recognize is, in his insistence on comparing men to women, he is not comparing trans women to cis women or trans men to cis men. And even in bringing up the biological fact that bloodstreams running on higher levels of testosterone have higher hematocrit levels, he doesn't take into account the fact that if gender affirming hormone therapy is undertaken, the levels switch to become congruent with the target gender, the target sex levels of hematocrit, of hemoglobin. And they do so quickly, like within 6 months. He'll also mention fast twitch muscles. He'll also mention a whole bunch of stuff. But he's insistent on comparing men to women as if no program of hormonal replacement therapy is undertaken. And he starts out by saying, if there are no restrictions, there have been restrictions in sport since 2004, when the levels were first set. For the IOC, 10 nanomoles per liter of testosterone. For World Athletics, 5 nanomoles per liter. And the only people who've been penalized for exceeding those levels in the history of the Olympic Games, World Athletics, have been cis women. Why? Because since 2004, when those criteria were established, only one medically transitioned trans woman has qualified or competed in the Olympic Games. More on that in a sec.
matter if they're a man or a woman, they just get a better score, and that's where it lands. And if everybody competes in the exact same competition, regardless of gender, and then you apply gender to those statistics and you find that in fact there actually is this bimodal distribution with more women on this side of it and more men on this side of it, and a little bit of overlap where there's some kind of fuzzy gray area in the middle, fine. But at least they all get to play fair.
Well, yes, like this is where I actually do think that one of the concerns is that if you go with something too broad, you're just going to eliminate females, if you will, use that definition. You're going to eliminate them from a lot of things. So if you take like the female who runs the fastest 100 meters, her time is beaten by 100 male students.
Again, look at who is he comparing? Who to who? How's this work?
Like universities or colleges in the US. And this isn't a surprise to those that are really interested in sports, because testosterone does a lot. Like the hemoglobin in the blood is really important. You get fast twitch muscle fibers. Like just as the UFC has decided, look, weight category is really important when it comes to fighting, so we're going to grade it on this. Otherwise, you're just going to see a big guy beat the crap out of a small guy 80-90% of the time. In lots of sports, they have recognized that testosterone, which is to say something that heavily correlates and typically is spread across the sexes, is that important. So
typically,
this is one of those ones that's difficult. Overlap. And I appreciate, we said our bit and we can move on, but like I think that this is one of the key pinnacle topics that's brought up all the damn time by people, because it's just so central to the broader conversation that's happening with trans people. And I fear that people who do have that view, where they don't necessarily care about sports and they think, hey, just let everyone compete, it will actually lead to the elimination of females in sports pretty much across the board. And that will give such a piece of utility towards the transphobic view that people might vote differently because of that one issue alone, because it's so present and obvious. But hey, another area we disagree on.
No, I
all right. Let me start at the outset. At the beginning of this video, Stephen clips this bit. Clip that little bit about the politics of the whole thing. And he clips Forrest's response up to a point.
I can definitely see where you're coming from, and like you make some fair points, and I get where I'm smelling what you're stepping in here.
That's where he clips the response. Forrest does, however, complete the thought.
But I think the biggest thing for me is like, and again, cannot stress this enough, I am not the person to ask about this. if I was looking at what you were just talking about, if I were an athlete, which I am very not, then my main concern would be just like competing. I want to do my best, and I want to see where I rank up. And if I don't rank up high enough, I want to try harder. And
that's kind of a key piece. You see, what's happening here is if you take the position that I'm going to draw the line here when it comes to affording people the ability to access a portion of social activity, and to Stephen, sport is important. He says so elsewhere in the video. To Forrest, he just said, I'm not the person to ask about this elsewhere in the videos, because I really don't care about sport, and I really don't know how these things work. Which is fine. But you see, his answer is, you can't draw the line here. You need to find a way of making, of affording access to all people to this area of society. And My problem is that if you start drawing lines, then I think that it's a broader political problem if the problem isn't set out properly. And Stephen's not helping in this regard. The problem isn't set out in such a fashion that people are thinking not in terms of men versus women in categories, but trans women, cis women, trans men, cis men. Make those comparisons and figure out what the differences are. Need to do that first. Stephen is making an error of comparison, logic. I'm not a philosopher. I don't know. He would, though, and he should. I talked to it's as if it's as if he's saying that gender affirming hormone therapy does nothing to influence the physicality of the bodies that are undergoing it. When the whole idea is to achieve a biological difference. And the biological difference has consequences in terms of fast twitch muscle, in terms of hematocrit, in terms of a number of fat distribution, in terms of a number of other things. And this is what is so frustrating to me as someone who has competed professionally for almost 26 years after undergoing a course of transition, that the dialogue is at this point when sports organizations have been dealing with it since before 2004. I did another video on this. You can catch all of that stuff. But it's just, again, time after time after time, it's the same arguments being presented to, huge numbers of people. And time after time after time, the very cogent answer a guy who doesn't care about sports just gave in Forrest Valkai, the very cogent answer to inclusion, which is in fact a key principle of the International Olympic Committee's framework for inclusion of trans people and people with differences of sexual development in the Olympic movement. It goes by the board. It's the desire to exclude people as rather than educate people. You're continuing to reinforce their biases here, Stephen, and I don't know what to say. I mean, Forrest is sitting there right in front of you, and it's a shame that you didn't get into the medical stuff. I mean, what the differences are substantial. God.
So let's say, for example, in some, you pick your favorite thing where like there is a true dichotomy of like performance between genders, and so like
Powerlifting.
Powerlifting. Okay, let's see about powerlifting. I mentioned earlier, I believe that in the entire history of inclusion for trans individuals, full inclusion, whether they'd had genital surgery or not, again, testosterone levels were set in 2004. So in 16 years between 2004 and 2020, in those four Olympiads, in those four quadrennia, there's only been one medically transitioned trans woman who has qualified for a national team at all, and only one who went to the Olympics. And that was well, how about this? Tokyo 2020, weightlifting, women's 87 kilograms plus results. Let's see. Wenwen Lee. Wow, dude, 320 pounds. Holy Moses. That's pretty impressive. Emily Jade Campbell, very impressive. Sarah Robles. Let's see. I'm looking for the trans person. There she is, Laurel Hubbard. She didn't make the qualifier. She didn't even qualify. So there's your gold medalist. Cis woman, cis woman, cis woman, cis woman, cis woman, cis woman. Cis woman, cis woman, cis woman. So she's not even on the board, let alone the podium. Again, one medically transitioned trans woman in 16 years.
Sure, trans people have been allowed in the Olympics.
Going to grade it on this. Otherwise, you're just going to see a big guy beat the crap out of a small guy 80-90% of the time.
I gotta find where I was.
Ask about this. if I was looking at what you were just talking about, if I were an athlete, which I am very not, then my main concern would be just like competing. You know, I want to do my best, and I want to see where.
Yeah, we saw that.
That matters to me, and I would consider it patronizing to say, "Well, you play with your group over there, and don't come up here with us." And like that's how I would see it. But like maybe athletes have a different opinion, and maybe that's I don't know. I'm a reading guy.
No, I totally get it, and it comes down to utility, right? There's no right or wrong decisions here. It's just like, what is the utility? What are you trying to achieve? What's the goals here? You know, it's about utility, not about what's right, kind of thing.
So here's the thing, you know, utility for a person who is a spectator is different from the utility for the person who is playing the game. And utility for someone who is takes a very distant view of sport, as Forrest does. It's like, I don't care, but you know, engages with the concept in an intellectual sort of way, is even further afield. And basically, that's what Forrest is saying. Ask the athletes. I don't know. I'm a book guy. And Stephen is sitting here saying, I'm comparing men to women, and I fear that,
I guess the last pushback I would put on that is that if you did that, especially in powerlifting, I don't think you'd see a female at all. Like it would all entirely be male. And the problem is that very much feeds into the narrative that anti-trans people are pushing, and that is that the whole trans movement is really anti-feminine.
I don't think I'd see another power lifter at all. I'd see, I'd never see another female. And I think I already went through that, right? You were looking at the chart over here when I went on my little rant. And that's what I was responding to. How can you say that, Stephen? Four quadrenniums, one medically transitioned trans woman qualifies and actually goes to the Olympics, and only one qualifies in 4 quads, and that's Laurel. She did not finish. She had 13 cis women in front of her. That ain't domination.
And it's against female. And the problem is by my lights, is that I don't actually think that that's wrong when it comes to sports. And this is why I want to separate sex from gender. And I want to say, look, it's about secondary sex characteristics. Stop bashing trans people about this, because it's not got nothing to do with them. But the mainstream view from more left-leaning people is more akin to what your intuitions are. And I appreciate it's not your strong suit, but that is more akin to what people have. But yeah, it's an interesting dialectic.
I would love to learn more.
It sure is an interesting dialectic, and it's really nice to sit here and listen to you have an academic discussion about something I have spent the last 26 years of my life pursuing. I'd like to take a charitable view. I put in comment in Stephen's comment section how you get a hold of me. Reached through back channels on a couple of occasions. I don't know if Z ever will. But it sure is frustrating to see this happen time and time and time again. I guess if I have any disappointment with Forrest, is not pushing back on the biology part about what happens in transition. What are the things that happen? About the fallacy that is being engaged here that compares men to women and treating trans women as if they are men hormonally in their physicality, in their actual oxygen carrying capacity of their blood. You have a larger frame, you have less oxygen. You used to have fast twitch muscles, but they don't stick around. Somebody once likened it to how, putting a, you're running on different fuel here. And there are biological changes that do take place over time. And there are studies that look at that. But time after time after time, it's men are stronger than women. And time after time after time, it's someone who is, and it's Nico Stratus wrote a great article that I ran across. We're never at the table. Fortunately, in my sport, I have been. And at the moment, because of political circumstances, really, Nobody wants to touch the issue since the IOC basically released their framework in 2021, November 2021. There was a push to get things done early in 2022 in sailing, and it got shelved, or at least put on the back burner, because it's just gotten more and more and more hysterical in the political sense, not in any other sense. Because of approaches that we've seen displayed here on the part of people with large platforms to influence thought. So that's what I've got to say. If Stephen reaches out to me, that'd be great. And I promise I'd have a reasonable conversation, but I'm not sure he's aware of some of these things. And I'm probably not the right person to have the conversation. I am not a medical doctor. But I am a trans person who has experienced what transition is and how it looks over time. That's all I got. Oh man, oh man, oh man. I gotta get back to the old StreamYard and end the recording. Thanks for watching. You know, leave me a comment, like, share, subscribe, all that other good stuff. And we'll talk to you later.